Admitting powerlessness over our problems is extremely difficult, and putting God at the forefront of our lives in the face of those problems is even more difficult still. Welcome to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Alan Hyde, and I'm your host. I ask you to join me as we unravel stories of recovery, shift perspectives, and inspire change in those who are seeking answers and solution. Let's get into it. Tonight, as we venture into the world of mental health, recovery, and spirituality, I'm joined tonight by our producer, Gabe. Gabe, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to have you. I appreciate your help with all this.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it keeps us out of trouble on a Friday night. Huh?
For sure.
So tonight we're gonna venture slowly into the world of codependency. Gabe and I were chatting a little bit about it prior. I'm going to break down some concepts. We're going to get Gabe's perspective on it too as we go and just kind of chat and riff a little bit and see if we can impart some wisdom to you guys here as we get into it.
Absolutely.
Before we jump into the concepts tonight and the tools that we're going to share, I do a segment called Tonight's Tools. And Tonight's Tools is a segment where people write into me. They suggest tools. This is people I've networked with from all over the U.S. They write in tools, and I share them with the community, and we unpack them a little bit before we get into the main topic for the night. And tonight's tool comes from a gentleman. His name is Jason out of San Francisco, and he writes in that when he's having a hard day, he goes to his journal. And in his journal, he practices gratitude, and his go-to acronym is GLAD, G-L-A-D. And what he says GLAD stands for when he's writing in his journal is he starts by writing down something that he's grateful for that day. And so he starts with his practice of gratitude, and he writes down just one thing, right? Could be that there was no traffic on the way to work. It could be that he had a great meal, but he writes down one thing that he was grateful for that day. He then goes to L and he writes down one thing that he learned today. All right. So, could be, something that he's studying, could be a new book that he's reading, could be a conversation that he had with somebody, but he writes down one thing that he learned that day so that, he can keep his mind sharp, but also just check in that, hey, here I am in the present moment, learning new things in my life. And then he goes to A. A is something that he accomplished today. All right. So, making sure we check in with our accomplishments are extremely important for our mental health. And Jason likes to do that on a daily basis. So he writes down things he accomplished that day, whether it's, just, treating people with kindness that day or whether it's, accomplishing something big like on momentous occasions like winning an award or getting a huge assignment done at work. But he writes down an accomplishment for that day. And then he goes to D, which is something that he delighted in that day. And I think this is one, I really liked this concept because this is one that we can lose sight of, in our day to day. And, whether that's you saw a beautiful, bouquet of flowers at the store or, you saw a wonderful sunset or, you had a really great conversation with a friend, something that you delighted in that day. And I think this is a valuable tool. It's not so dissimilar from things that I often recommend to my clients in clinical practice. And I think if you implemented the GLAD tool like Jason does, I think you're going to find just a lot of gratitude in your day and a lot of mindfulness as well. Gabe, have you heard that term, mindfulness?
I have. I'm not too sure how it works in context or what it really means, but I have heard it a lot for sure. Yeah.
It's kind of a buzzword these days on the internet, huh?
Definitely.
Yeah. Tools like this, it's like mindfulness is about being in the present moment, And there's a term I really like. It's called just for today, right? Or one day at a time. I'm going to be in the present moment. I'm going to be aware of, just what I'm struggling with, what I'm feeling,
Absolutely.
Do you have any practices like that keep you checked in day to day?
Honestly, I want to be better with being present in the moment. I think a lot in advance. Like I think for the future a lot. So when it concerns mindfulness and being present and doing things every day to maintain that presence, I don't really have anything specifically that I'm doing every day to keep me present like that. So I would love to find that though.
Yeah. Can I, we were talking a little bit before the show came on. you do music.
Yeah.
Right.
So my goal is to be an executive in the industry, work primarily as an A&R, and then work my way through the label, ranks. But I want to work with artists and help and grow artists and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like working on that music day to day keeps you, like, when you are working on that stuff, like, keeps you grounded?
Absolutely. I would say so. Like, that's kind of my escape from the world, so to speak. Like, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm like listening to new music or talking to a new artist or whatever that may look like. So, yeah.
And that's exactly it. You know, it's like when we have things in our life that are important to us. You know, for some people, I would say for all of us, family plays a role like that. But outside of those aspects, what Gabe is touching on is kind of being in that flow state. He's found something he's really passionate about. It's a goal of his. He's striving for it, and when he's in it, he said, "I'm in it." You know,
for sure.
And that's mindfulness in a nutshell.
Absolutely.
You know, so you guys listening, if you're wondering too, kind of how, you know, Gabe was touching on, like, I've heard the term, I'm generally aware of it. That's what it is being presently engaged in the things that you're doing. And it's a topic that I often work with in my clinical practice with clients is being in the moment, because you know, we all have things that take us, you know, out of the present moment in our lives. You know, a difficult situation at work, you know, maybe we're having a fight with our significant other, or, you know, our family members are having a hard time. You know, it's hard to stay in the present moment.
Absolutely. I feel like life brings a lot of circumstances just naturally that you kind of got to account for, that may take you off of your focus or your center. And so, you know, that's one of those things too. Like, it's just staying mindful and present in those moments of difficulty too. That's another thing that's a little hard. Naturally, as humans.
What do you think? You know, if somebody was just popping in on a Friday night, what do you think they would need to hear just to kind of encourage them to stay present? Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Tried to not get it on the mic.
It's all good, dude. It's all good.
But I'm sorry. So repeat your question.
Yeah. How would you just let's say you're talking to a friend. How would you encourage them to be present in the moment?
I mean, I would tell them to stay focused on what they love, whether that's family, whether that's a career. Like, put your energy into something like that, so that it kind of takes your mind away from any of the other things surrounding you that may take you off of your square in that moment. And I know it's difficult. It's easier said than done, for sure. But like, when you love something, you're passionate about it, whether that's a person or a thing or opportunity, whatever that may look like, I do believe that that passion kind of distracts you in a way, and takes you out of your whatever zone that is. You know? You know, I think it's such an important piece that you touch on, especially in today's society. It's like everybody's after the bag. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants, you know, to get themselves out there. But when we slow down and we focus on, like, why am I doing this thing? Right.
You know, who are the people that are important that I maintain relationships with while I'm doing these things? You know, it's hugely important. And I think there's so many people that are going to hear this that would just relate to exactly what you just said. You know, it's just stay connected to the people that are important to you. And I
heard a quote one time that says, when you can't stay motivated, stay consistent.
Oh, I like that.
And so even with that, I think, like, whatever it is that you're passionate about, consistency is going to be key in getting you to whatever level you want to reach. And so sometimes that consistency can get you in a space where you're not really focused on the problems in the world. Like, that passion is fueling you.
Yeah. You know, and it's we'll talk about it a little bit when we get into some of these concepts tonight too. But consistency is so important because you know, it's like, especially in American culture, everything is like, it's got to be perfect. It's got to look great. It's got to sound great. You know, I've got to get it right now, you know. And you go so much further and have so much more fulfillment in your life when you just do things consistently.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, and it's kind of like, even like as I've come into this and getting to know you guys, it's like you just consistently connect with people. You know, just have a conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the key to even the business that I'm going into, like, is the relationships you build and how you connect with people. I just know that a conversation goes a long way.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of value in it.
Yeah. Do you have like a brand that you go by in your music, or?
No. So like I said, I want to be on the label side.
Oh, okay.
So all of my stuff is business related, and how to market artists and how to even potentially managing artists, anything of that nature is what I'm going towards. And so even as an A&R, it'll be discovering new talent, helping organize and arrange albums, all of that kind of stuff, picking singles.
Yeah.
So that's
cool.
my world.
Yeah. And you said you're heading down to Austin here pretty soon too.
Yeah. So I'm going to Grammys are having an event just during the South by Southwest time. So that's like in a couple weeks. And if you've never been to South by Southwest, it's absolutely amazing. So it's a variety of different entertainment based events and networking events and panel discussions and all of that. So it's really, really cool.
Well, I appreciate the recommendation. I just moved here to Texas from California.
You gotta check it out.
Yeah, dude. Land of the avocados, you know. So I'm looking forward to all the Texas stuff that we got going on out here.
And Austin may remind you a little bit of California in certain ways, like small ways. But Austin is a really, really cool city.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I hear it's buzzing down there.
It definitely is. Yeah. It's growing fast.
Nice. Cool.
For sure.
Yeah. You know, and what we're going to jump into here in a moment, it's like the stuff Gabe's talking about getting into, you know, managing artists, you know, or what you guys watching, whatever it is that you're into. I'm sure we could all agree it takes a pretty strong foundation of self-esteem to follow the things we want to do in our life.
Absolutely.
And the concept we're going to touch on today is codependency. And, you know, I think a lot of times in society, and maybe Gabe, you could jump in on this too and confirm for me, right? Because I've been in the realms of mental health for 11 years, so sometimes it's hard for me to take the hat off and remember how like society views these things. But I think, you know, when someone hears the term codependency, they think of like an enmeshed relationship, right? Like hard to differentiate themselves from somebody else.
Yeah.
You think that's kind of how they would define it?
I would say so. I mean, I think a lot of people, just like anything else, have a lot of definitions for very simple concepts. But I think with codependency, I do think people just think it's being so intertwined with the person that you can't really move away from it. That's the best way that I could describe it. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it's not incorrect, right? So codependency, one of the definitions and one of the accepted definitions is an enmeshed relationship. And maybe kind of like in a technical term, it's like an inability or difficulty to engage in healthy interpersonal relationships, like conflict resolution, communication, things like that. But I tell my clients this, it's like, think of your emotional state as a human as like a tree, right? And if we were to take codependency, that definition, it's like that's one piece of bark if you were to pull it off the tree, right? And your experience, it starts to manifest into a bunch of branches, right? And those are the symptoms we experience. Like I got in a fight, in an argument, substance use, you know, gambling, I'm speeding in my car, I'm really angry, right? These are all the symptoms that grow. But let me ask you this, Gabe. If you were to climb up that tree and start chopping off the branches, what do you think happens to that tree?
It's still going to be there.
It's still going to be there.
Yeah, it's planted, it's rooted.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we don't, in the clinical world, we don't chase symptoms, right? So I used to work in treatment centers for years and years, and when someone would come in fresh to get the support, you know, they'd be ready, let's say like they're dealing with substances or, you know, a mental health, you know, kind of like bipolar, depression, anxiety, whatever it is. If we go straight for the symptom and we start chopping off those branches, the tree's sending that same energy from the roots, right? And so what happens is, you know, the branches over here, you know, start growing wildly because that energy needs somewhere to go.
Right.
And I always joke, like with my clients who've been in treatment, it's like, this is why you see someone when they first get sober and now all of a sudden they're at the treatment center trying to have sex with everybody, you know?
Yeah.
Or they're out on the patio smoking cigarettes.
Right.
Yeah. And what we've got to do, what we got to get really used to with our emotional well-being is getting to the roots, you know, and there's a lot of ways to do that. Some would argue, and I would stand from the clinical perspective as, you know, an expert. I've been doing this for 11 years and studying for longer than that. But I'll let you guys know that are listening, I may be an expert, but what we're talking about here tonight are theoretical principles. And so take what you like and leave the rest. But when we get to the roots, we would suggest that there's kind of 4 major ones that we want to look at. Shame is a big one. We look at experiences of abandonment, right, in childhood. We look at experiences of neglect, right, so not getting their needs met emotionally or otherwise. And we look at severe experiences of trauma and abuse, right, whether that's spiritual abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse. These are kind of the main roots. And if those don't get addressed, it's like you could be in therapy forever, but if you don't address those roots, you're probably not going to get very far in the managing of symptoms. They're going to keep coming up in different ways, you know. And I won't dive too deep with you, but have you ever noticed times in your life where like you'll address something in your life and you think it's resolved, and then it pops up in another way like months later?
For sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Like it's a few different things. I think for me, discipline has always been a big thing, right? So I'll just use working out as an example, because this was something that for a long time, especially after I stopped playing sports, like I got into a routine of not working out. And so with that, like me having the discipline to be consistent with it, I would be consistent for about 2 to 3 months, think I'm good to go, and then fall off for a month, and then now it goes another 4 to 5 months of me not working out. So it's been, I think that's an area that I definitely want to grow in and get better in terms of consistency, as we were talking about earlier. Like that's just one specific example that I could think of off the top of my head. If
you're open to it, being kind of just vulnerable on that one, what do you think the thought process is for you when you'll work out and then you notice that it falls off?
Honestly, I think that it goes back to like times when I was in high school and all that stuff. I had a lot of natural talent, and so I relied on that, like in sports. I wasn't one of the kids that was getting up at 6 a.m. in the morning and going to work out on my own. I would just go to do my regular routine, go to work, go to like mandatory workouts, and then be done for the day. Like I wasn't doing the extra stuff in order to get to the next level. And I think that just kind of manifested as I got older into like just expecting the natural to be there. And so I would say that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a big piece too, right? Especially you know, as we grow and age, it's like our mental health becomes the predominant factor as to like, especially physical stuff, like how successful we're going to be physically from one athlete to another. You know, like I'm washed up, you know. And,
you and me both.
Lateral movements are not a thing for me anymore.
My hips don't move the same. Feet work is probably off. Like
yeah. But you know that piece of like kind of like the intangible thought process of relating it back, like the self-esteem that we need to like, man, you know, I fell off today. I didn't do what I told myself I was going to do. That one happens a lot. Like I'll work with a client in therapy and they have all these plans when they're going to leave my therapy session. And then they'll come back the next week and share like, I didn't do any of it. And the biggest stopgap, right, or the boundary is, you know, to stop beating ourselves up. And it's like it's easy to say that, and I think a lot of even the viewers listening would probably say like, you know, it's easy to say to not beat myself up, and I don't want to beat myself up, but when you're in it, you know, all those little moments of the negative self-talk that start to slip in, right? And I witness that day to day, you know, in my clinical practice all day long. You know, it's like clients are slipping into that place of like, a big one is they'll apologize for things that they shouldn't be sorry for. They believe that they've made this huge mistake and they're not redeemable, you know, and it's that little eroding factor like that we don't think about, especially when it comes to like little things like working out and staying consistent, that if we don't monitor with mindfulness in the moment, that it'll take us out for weeks at a time.
Absolutely. I think like another thing for me in general is just discipline. As I said, like even I just think back to being in school and like not being so focused on the work part of it. I've gotten better with it since I've been back in school now, but like there was a long time where I was just very undisciplined and focused on everything else but what I was supposed to be focused on. And so I don't know. I think that's a big thing that I want to address in my life, because I know every aspect is going to require some level of discipline. And so that's something that I'm still actively growing in.
Yeah, and you know, I think one thing too to touch on, because it was asked a lot last week, like how do we reach the men about mental health and having these conversations? And so I think I can speak at least on behalf of those who were listening last week and maybe checking in. It's like Gabe's an example of men want to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Right? And you heard it straight from his mouth. He wants to be better at these things, you know, and I think that's a really important. I remind men week to week, and the spouses, right, the females I work with, men, they don't want to be cut off emotionally. They don't want to be struggling with mental health or struggling with consistency or whatever it is we struggle with. We want to be good men. All right. And you know, I was going to put it at the end of this show, but I think right now is the best time. It's like a message to the men who are going to find this video. Brother, you're not alone, man. I was just talking with it was Kim right before the show. She had the show right before mine, and she was talking to an ex-pro ball player, and you know, men will come together in their struggles. And I was asked last week, like, how do you get men to find this information? The reality is brother, you know, right? You know you need support, right? Gabe and I have been there, but you got to reach out. You got to find guys like Gabe and I who are willing to talk to you, who are willing to have those conversations without, like, you don't need to be analyzed or patronized, and you don't need to be told what your experience is, but you do need to reach out and you do need to talk about it. And I'll share something here and see if you relate to this, Gabe. I was talking with someone the other day who was asking, like, how do I get my partner to talk? You know, and she was like, we'll get in these emotional conversations and he just goes stone cold quiet. And dude, if I had $1 for every time I heard that in my 11-year career, I'd be retired.
I can imagine.
And I shared with her this, and this is purely, this is just, this is less of like empirical, clinical, you know, proof, more of like clinical experience. So again, take it with a grain of salt, take what you like and leave the rest. But I shared with her, I said, men are really logical, right? We want to find the solution. And on top of wanting to find the solution, if it's somebody that we love or care about that we're engaged with, we want to help that person find the solution. And we want to be a part of that. But what happens is that it's not that the man or any man can't feel that emotion and can't communicate it. It's like they're trying to solve an equation, right? And they're logically thinking through each step. And every time a new one is introduced, they're not at the place of solution for the equation that was just presented. And now all of a sudden we're working on something else. And then if you present that 10 or 15 times, of course they're going to go quiet, because they're in here trying to find the solution for the first question that was asked. Right?
Exactly.
You relate to that?
Absolutely. 1000%. Like, it's funny. I was actually watching this show on Netflix called Love is Blind. And I was just watching some of the dynamics between the couples and like trying to see myself in some of these people. And it's very interesting because I'm definitely the type that will disengage. I'm definitely a passive person when it comes to being argumentative, being in arguments and stuff like that. I definitely am more standoffish because I like to collect my thoughts before I respond. And sometimes that could be seen as standoffish in that way. But I definitely relate to that.
What season are you on?
I'm on the newest season, so I'm caught up now. So I'm waiting on the last 2 episodes.
The debriefs always crack me up.
That's the best part. That's the best part.
For sure. It's funny that you bring it up because I was actually just watching an episode of it too, and dude, the concepts that we'll touch on here in a minute in codependency, it's like I want you to think like where you've seen it. Dude, after talking to me, you're going to watch that show so differently. And I promise I'm not going to ruin it for you, but you're going to be watching and be like, dude, fuck, Alan was saying that this is, dude, some of them, the main concept that I want to spend a few minutes on when we get into it is self-esteem, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that show is chock full of those moments, especially around like love and like instant gratification love, where you see like people are seeking that validation, right? And for those who haven't watched Love is Blind, people, they get in this pod and they can't see each other for extended periods of time, but they talk to each other and they fall in love without seeing each other's faces. And I'll reserve any of my opinions on whether that works or not, because the reality is anything can work for anybody. But when they all come together and they see each other, that's, you know, every time they do those reveals, it's just it's a box of chocolates, dude. You don't know what you're gonna get. Yeah. It's
actually really, really. I laughed a lot during the show. Just because some of the people on there, I just like this. It's a lot of different dynamics. I'll put it like that. And just seeing the reaction, especially when they first meet each other, it's really, really funny to me. Because I don't know, I've never been a person that, well, like you said, I reserve my opinions on the show, but I don't think that will work for me. I'll put it like that.
Same here. You know, it's like I sometimes I'll joke. It's like I'm not pretty enough to be on a show like that anyway. You know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's kind of how we were talking too. Here's a tie-in to shows like that as well. As I think they, you know, I was watching an interview of like how they screen for these individuals, and they're looking for certain, you know, not like personality types, but they're looking for certain backgrounds. And a lot of those backgrounds are those 4 major roots that we were talking about earlier of like shame, abandonment, neglect, and histories of abuse, which is kind of messed up when you think about it, that like that's what sells on like a big picture. But it gives us opportunities to have conversations like this where a lot of people relate to that, and you see that like those are the cores of like what those people are connecting on in those rooms. But it also highlights love isn't going to save you. A relationship isn't going to save you. And I heard this thing the other day that said, I used to think I'll take care of you and you take care of me, until I realized how shallow that was, right? And that the reality is I'm going to take care of me for you, and my hope is that you take care of you for me. And imagine how much better of a connection and relationship, friendship we would have.
Right.
You know, if I'm 10 times better emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and you are too, it's like, imagine how much better that would make a friendship or a relationship or all those things.
Exactly. That kind of goes into the whole, like, being a whole person before you bring yourself to another person. Like, I feel like so many people get into relationships to just get into a relationship, and it's not so much it's not so much with their own self in mind, I guess. It's with society standards in mind. And so I think that, like you said, like being whole in all of those areas, like, it's kind of a requirement for success.
Yeah, absolutely. My therapist tells me all the time, she shares with me, the healthier you become, right, in your work, not just emotionally, but, you know, moving closer to your higher power, whatever that is, however you define it in this world, having healthier boundaries for yourself and what you tolerate, and being able to walk away when a situation isn't good for you, that the healthier you are in that, the healthier partner you're going to attract.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's I remember there might have been a time in my life I'd hear something like that from a mental health professional. I'd be like, get out of here with this woo-woo shit. Right? But the reality is like when you're around it enough, you see like this is how people relate. And you can, it's like when I work with addicts, right? 12-steppers, those who struggle with substances, I'll always joke with them because they, across the board, they have this experience. They'll walk into a co-ed meeting where there's men and women, and right when they walk in the room, they already know that girl is there, you know? And it's like this unspoken kind of like, it's not a kinship, it's not a bond, it's pure chaos. Right? And they'll walk in the room and they feel it instantly. And it's how we're wired, man. We are wired to connect on so many ways that, like, even with all of the research I've done in my 11-year career and all the books that I've read, there's nothing that quite encapsulates the truth of how much we understand each other as people, even non-verbally.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was, again, going back to the show because I literally just watched it.
Yeah.
But I'm watching some of the dynamics of the couples, and like there's one couple on there that's like, they would literally just sit in silence.
Yeah.
For like, it was like a whole 10 minutes of the show. Like, it was just silence.
You talking about the country boy and the blonde girl?
Yeah. And it was weird at first, but I'm like, I kind of get that. I'm like, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've never really experienced that. I've always thought silence was awkward or uncomfortable. And sometimes it's really just being present.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, we relate to each other a lot without saying a word.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, there's we talk about that a lot in therapy too, where the pause, the silence, that there's awareness there.
Yeah.
And I want to jump into a little bit of this because I'm sure those who are listening are like, Alan, when are you going to get to the clinical stuff? Love is Blind is just it's a funny show to watch.
It is. It's very funny.
So I got sidetracked. But what's interesting is, you know, when we were talking earlier about those 4 roots, if we don't address things like shame in our life, if we don't address things like our trauma and abuse histories, if we don't address abandonment and neglect issues, it manifests behaviorally. And one of the ways in our society today, and especially in America, is codependency. Right? And there's a reason that this book that I would recommend for those watching, I'm going to hold it up. It's called Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody. If you're listening, again, that's Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody. There's a reason why this is a best-selling book. And it's not because it's like there aren't other theories that explain this. It's just she brilliantly encapsulates the affliction of codependency and these core symptoms that need to be addressed. And she defines codependency as when we're growing up experiencing anything less than nurturing. All right. And I'll share that with clients sometimes, and especially like the parents are always shocked. You know, it's like what that means is that if you were a less than perfect parent, your child could be experiencing some of these symptoms. That's a hard pill to swallow. Yeah. Right. And I'm not here to be a pessimist. I never like to bring the mood down, but I am a realist. All right. We're imperfect people. We're going to make mistakes, parents especially. And I have an athletic background, same as Gabe, and 3 out of 10, and you're a legend, man. Yeah. You know, you don't have to be a perfect parent. Yeah. And you'll be even more set free as a parent if you can embrace that you're going to make mistakes and build your awareness around these things. And so, here's the 5 core symptoms of codependency that Pia Mellody outlines in her book. She says the 5 core symptoms are difficulty experiencing appropriate levels of self-esteem, difficulty setting functional boundaries, difficulty owning and expressing our own reality, difficulty taking care of adult needs and wants, and difficulty expressing reality moderately. And over the weeks, we'll get into each one of them specifically. But tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about self-esteem. And we've kind of already been talking about that, you know, even when we were riffing about the show and kind of joking about it. Yeah. You know, when you watch those love shows, you can see right away, like, how shook up people get when they're going to be rejected, denied, right? It's like... Yeah. And that's existed forever, you know. Netflix just capitalized on it with Nick Lachey.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Who would have thought it would be Nick Lachey out of all the people?
Yeah. How would you define self-esteem?
I think that self-esteem is how you feel other people feel about you. Okay. I think, well, let me frame it like this. I'll say that it's how you feel about you, but it's the way you perceive it is based upon how other people feel. Yeah. And I think that, especially in cases of low self-esteem, I think that's how people view it. It's about, oh, how are they going to see me in this light? How do I look to this person? But really, self-esteem comes from self. It comes from within. Yeah. So it should be an internal thing.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to put it. You know, if we lack it, right? Which we'll talk a little bit about kind of clinically what self-esteem looks like. When we lack it, we're definitely going to be worried about what people think about us, you know, and that can become so bad where, you know, people even lose the will to live, you know, and it's why it's so important. It's also why I gave the disclaimer about men earlier, because although, you know, women have these struggles too, it's like as a man, I see this in my clinical practice, and it's rough when you see a young dude who just doesn't believe in himself, you know, and not even just doesn't believe in himself, but is like really struggling. And it's like, brother, a few adjustments and just imagine the impact you could have on the world around you, you know, and to watch people, well, first of all, to watch people own that, embrace it, and like crawl over glass to get to it it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. Is as tragic as it is when you see them not, you know, and so it's extremely important both for men and women to build self-esteem. And self-esteem it is all of the things Gabe was talking about, and it refers to an individual's subjective evaluation of their own value and worth, right? Which is precisely what you were talking about. You know, it gets into like when it pertains to like what other people think, that's more of like when we're lacking it and not holding boundaries for ourselves. But what you were saying about like the way we appraise ourselves, right? Nobody else gets to do that for you.
Right.
You know, and this is what I teach my clients every day when those opportunities come up. And what I'll share with you guys is you have control over how you feel about yourself. And if we can check in with that consistently, self-esteem grows. We build a foundation of it. And it's, we hear all the motivational videos and stuff, and all those things are great, but there is an element of practicality in the fact that if you build a foundation of self-esteem, things are going to work out for you. You know, we don't know how successful things will be. The market will determine that, and your own skills and all that kind of stuff. But what we do know is you'll have one heck of a shot. Yeah. We know that for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's some really tangible ways that we can go about it. The first one is, well, it plays into everything we've been talking about tonight, is self-awareness.
Yeah.
All right. You know, we can't wander out here. It's like as Gabe and I look out the windows here, you know, you can't wander out here and engage with people without and not be aware of yourself and expect things to go well.
Exactly.
All right. You ever see that out in society, like people just not aware of their surroundings or what they're doing or saying?
Absolutely. I mean, it could just be as simple as somebody walking out in the middle of the street in front of your car while you're driving.
Yeah.
Like, and they're just not paying attention at all. Like, it shows up in so many different ways. And I don't know. I was always raised to be aware of my surroundings at all times. Like, maybe that's because of where my family's from and like where we come from. But I also think that, like, I don't know. I can't imagine a world where I'm not, like, I don't have my head on a swivel.
Yeah.
And that's even internally too. Like, I think that's why I can acknowledge things that I need to work on, is because of that awareness of self.
Yeah.
So,
and that's, you know what's interesting is like, whatever it is we struggle with, that's when we can acknowledge it. That's when we're the closest we'll ever be to the change we need.
Yeah.
And I always give this disclaimer to clients that I work with, is like, when you see annoying behavior out and about, remind yourself you're capable of that same behavior, right? You are not disconnected from society in that. The difference is that you're aware of it and you're choosing not to. And if you can call your awareness to that consistently, that is a great place to start to build self-esteem. Yeah. Right. So being aware of what's going on in here, what you're feeling, learning to start putting words to that with emotions. Right. And if you're listening to this, that's a great place to start. Right. If you're looking for support in that, I encourage you to reach out for therapy, not just to me, but just anywhere. Right. So you can start to put words to those experiences so you know what you're up against.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll plant that seed as well. So if you're listening at this point, you want to submit for tonight's tool for us to review and talk about and chop it up, go to alanhyde.com. There are buttons all over the website where you can submit an email, and we'll review those. And if you just have questions, or you just want to subscribe to the emails that get sent out on the blogs that I post and all those things, jump over there. You can also find the podcast and other videos that I upload. Another thing is positive self-talk. Right? We've heard of that one before, haven't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Words of affirmation, all of that stuff. I remember I was gifted a book, and it had all of these different self-affirmations in it. I got that for like graduation some years ago. But yeah, positive self-talk is definitely something that I do for myself. It's not a easy thing to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Depending on the circumstances, but it's definitely something I try to practice.
Yeah. You know, and we're all at different phases, I think, with positive self-talk. What I start my clients very in a tangible place, which is start neutral. Right? If you're used to telling yourself like things will be okay, try start reminding yourself I'm okay right now. You know, it's that subtle positive shift that's very true. Yeah. Right. Which we'll talk about more about like the reality concept of the symptoms of codependency. But that's a big one is we lose touch with the reality that you're living and breathing and okay right now. That's the reality. And even if you're in pain and you've got struggles and difficult things are happening, you're okay. Right. And if you're feeling truly like you're not alone. Yeah. Right. You are not alone. You got to reach out. Got to reach out. So I would suggest starting there. Start neutral. I'm okay, right? Graduate to things like I'm loved over time. That's a big one. Yeah. You know, write it down if you have to. Say it in the mirror if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. But just start to shift that if you can in your mind, and that'll help you start to build a foundation of the way you appraise your self-esteem, your worth and value. You know. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Definitely. I want to get back to, I used to be, again, going back to the discipline thing, I used to be consistent about journaling. I haven't done it in a minute, but I do want to get back to that as well. But yeah, I used to just write like letters to myself. Yeah. Like just telling myself what I'm capable of, who I am, who God says I am, all of those different things. So, yeah, like I said, I want to get back to that. I haven't done it in a long time, but yeah, I definitely believe in that.
And in the beginning of this, you told me you weren't really sure what mindfulness was, but you're dropping all these nuggets of wisdom over here, dude. That's it. That's it right there. Yeah. You know, and that plays into setting realistic goals. I know we've got maybe like 10-ish minutes here. Yeah. And there's a few left, but setting realistic goals is really important. I'll get a client that comes in and they've got a laundry list of goals, and not just for their mental health, but like I want to accomplish this and I want to do this. And the good news is that you can do whatever you want. You can choose to do whatever you want, but set realistic goals. Yeah. Realistic goals look like, what can I get done today? Yeah. You know, if you only got energy to fold the laundry today, then you accomplish something. Yeah. All right. And as a therapist, I think sometimes I'll share those components and people want to believe that, but this is where I will stand on a professional footing in this conversation and say, I cannot express to you enough how important it is, if you're listening to this, to just know that if all you've got is energy to clean your house today, if all you've got is energy to go put gas in the car so you're prepped for the week, or to just get groceries or just get by, that's more than enough. It's more than enough. And if that's all you're doing, it's not enough for someone to disqualify your worth and value ever, no matter what people have ever said to you. You know? Absolutely. And so we stand on that footing. You know, if you're listening to this, you find this podcast later, that's what we're about in here, right? You stand a firm footing, and as long as you're moving forward, right, you're going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next one is acceptance of imperfection. All right. We kind of touched on that earlier, how like it's a society that wants things to be done perfectly. Yeah. You know,
definitely. I think that's a big one for me, because I think I've always been taught, like in my house, to do things with a spirit of excellence and do everything at a high level. Because both of my parents were high achievers. They did well for themselves. But I think a lot of that does play into a role of me trying to get everything perfect and aligned and on point before I make a step towards what I really want to do. Yeah. And to be totally honest, it wasn't until the last few years where I've kind of gotten out of that, where I went back to school. I took a lot of different steps towards my actual goals versus having everything perfect and aligned and ready to go.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a big one for me too.
Yeah. Well, it's huge because anything worth doing is worth doing messy, man.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when I was first coming in here to do these shows, I'd tell myself, like, look, if I stumble over my words, if I'm anxious or nervous, I'm just going to do it. Right? I'll review it later. Right? We'll get into it later. You know, but just get into it. You know, and that's what I'm hearing, right? Like you were touching on, it's like the grappling between that is like, because when you do it, the excellence is that no one's going to do it like you do it, period. You know, that's excellent.
Absolutely.
That's not just excellent, it's necessary.
Yeah. And I think like sometimes we get stuck in the planning process. Whatever that may be, whether it's career goals, whether it's personal relationship, whatever. Like I feel like we get stuck in the organization of it all and not really focusing on, all right, what step can I make today to get there? So I think that's a constant battle. Yeah,
for sure. Let's cover one more and then we'll kind of wrap it up for tonight, but let's see which one here, because there's quite a few, but let's go with self-care to wrap it up.
Okay.
We hear a lot of things in society today about self-care. If you're listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, it's take ice baths. If you're listening to the Kardashians, it's go and get a pedicure. The reality is self-care, I kind of boil it down to this. Let go of things that you don't control, right? Figure out what you can control. And we talked about that in the episode last week. You have control of 3 things in your life: how you choose to feel about yourself, how you choose to behave, and if you're raising small children. And then that's the exception. Once those children are grown, you don't have control anymore. You hope your lessons have taken hold. So get a grasp on what you can control and let go of the rest. That's a good step for self-care.
Absolutely.
Another step is once you've got that, then use some of those behaviors to do the things that feel good, to exercise, to go and take care of your physical, mental, and medical needs, all those wonderful things. Yeah. Get a massage, you know, all those things are great for self-care. But I'll also toss in this is get real clear on a connection with something bigger than you. If that's a higher power, something spiritual, God, whatever it is. Know that you're not alone in this world, this universe, and the vast sky when you look up at night, and you're going to be feeling better.
Absolutely.
If you don't like that concept, I get it. I'm not here to cram it down your throat or proselytize or anything, all right? But what I will say is that the individuals that I've walked with in a clinical setting and in recovery settings who connect with something bigger than themselves, they feel and know self-care.
Absolutely.
Anything you'd add to that? Yeah,
I mean, again, for me, self-care is not something that I typically do. I mean, I'm just always moving, especially recently with working 2 jobs and being in school. Like, it's just kind of a lot of moving pieces. And so I don't really take a lot of time to just take care of myself sometimes. Like, even that goes into the working out piece, because that used to be one of my escapes. So I don't know. I got to get back to it.
Yeah. Put you first, you know. And
right.
And that's not a hey, this is what you should do. It's more of that's what we're all trying to remember, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That concept earlier of I'm going to take care of me for my community. All right. And that's something. It's like whatever it is, the listeners, Gabe, myself, whatever it is you do, no one can do it like you. All right. And this is why when it comes to self-esteem and building it, we detach from anybody else's appraisals of what your value is, what your worth is, because you're the only one that can value that. You're the only one that can define it. And all of these boundaries to protect you are what's going to help build you up.
Yeah.
Just go and take care of yourself. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to do it.
Yeah.
Got to get to it.
Yeah. Same. It's I remind myself daily, I'm certainly not perfect in those realms. Yeah. So I got to wake up and, you know, get those connections going, talk to God, maybe work out. You know, if I don't do those things, it's like Good luck on self-care.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So to wrap it up for tonight, we're going to come back. We talked about the 5 core symptoms of codependency. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to get into each one of them, and we're going to chop it up with the producers. We're going to discuss these things and get their perspectives as well, because, as we look at these things, we need to be talking to people, right, to make sense of not just the theories and the concepts, but how this actually looks in the broader world and in our society and our communities. So check in here, Fishbowl Radio Network, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, breaking the cycle every Friday night. We'll be here. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Breaking the Cycle. If you're looking for more information regarding the topics that I discuss in this podcast, jump over to alanhyde.com. The website will be in the description. If you're looking to get involved, make a donation, or to get your hands on some cool Breaking the Cycle merchandise, that will also be available at the website, and we encourage your support. Without your support, this podcast would not be possible. So I just want to thank you, and as always, bless your heart.